She's gone. And even the lies are gone now. When power tempts grief, what will you choose? They said only fools walked into Luma 5 with expectations. But Arlen wasn't here to hope. He was here to find something specific, something impossible. The docking bay hissed open, releasing a blast of sterile recycled air into the chaotic symphony of Luma 5's central bazaar. Arlen stepped out in his worn black coat, the fabric brushing against the thigh holster of his plasma cutter. His boots clanked against the metallic floor, tracking years of soot and blood. He paused just long enough to survey the shimmering holographic signs and multicolored alien crowds flooding the concourse. Luma 5 was not the kind of place you visited, you braved it. Orbiting just beyond the starless rift of the Deadward Expanse, it was a lawless trade hub where smugglers, relic hunters, mercenaries, and memory thieves bartered like animals. And it was the only place in the known sectors where whispers of the Veiled Pearls still echoed through drunken tongues and forgotten data scrolls. That's why Arlen was here. He wasn't looking for weapons, credits, or the next big contract. No, he was after something rumored to exist once every century, a translucent gem from the Teleron Nebula, said to shimmer with the memories of dying stars. One that could resonate with certain wavelengths of neural emotion, specifically grief. A myth, perhaps, but grief was the only thing he had plenty of. Arlen's eyes narrowed as he moved past a row of vendors, hawking cryo-spice and anti-grav furs. He passed by a merchant with 6 arms carving something alive. Another was selling bottles that screamed when opened. Then he saw her. A woman, no, not human. She had a lithe frame, barely over 5 feet, wrapped in a silver-stitched bodysuit that clung to her like light. Her skin shimmered like liquid mercury under the dual suns, reflecting the movement of the crowd in faint echoes. Long strands of hair, metallic and soft, flowed behind her in zero-grav braids. But it was her eyes that stopped Arlen, piercing cyan orbs, wide with urgency and frustration. She stood at a cluttered stall, arguing with a 3-eyed Varkan trader. "I said I'll return with the rest. Just hold it," she insisted, her voice high, almost melodic. "Half payment, half claim," the Varkan croaked, shoving the gem back into a lockbox. The object in question pulsed faintly. Even from 3 meters away, Arlen felt its heat, not thermal, but emotional. The stone was deep violet, glowing softly from within. It pulsed not in sync with light, but with breath. Leona, the strange woman, reached out again with trembling fingers. The Varkan slapped her hand away with a hiss. Arlen stepped forward without thinking. "I'll cover it," he said, voice steady. The Varkan blinked all 3 eyes. "What?" "You heard me. I'll pay the full sum." Arlen pulled a set of encoded credits from his belt, pressing them onto the datapad. Leona turned sharply, her mouth slightly open. Her eyes scanned Arlen up and down, suspicious. "Why? You don't even know me." "No," Arlen replied, glancing once at the gem. "But I know what that stone means to you." He didn't explain how her face had the same look his sister wore just before the asteroid strike. Didn't say how he'd once let a moment pass, and the consequences haunted him every night since. The transaction finalized with a chirp. The Varkan hissed in annoyance, pocketing the credits before shoving the gem into Leona's hand and turning away. Leona clutched the stone like it might vanish. Her face softened and her voice trembled. "Thank you. That wasn't just generous. It was reckless." "I specialize in reckless," Arlen replied, half grinning. "Name's Arlen." She hesitated, then spoke. "Leona. From Valora." Valora. A name he hadn't heard since a war journal 3 years ago. Their planet had suffered a devastating orbital collapse. Survivors were rare. As they walked away from the stall, Arlen glanced at her again. "So, Leona from Valora, what exactly did I just pay for?" She looked at the gem, eyes growing distant. "A second chance, or maybe the worst mistake of my life." And just like that, Arlen realized something that twisted in his gut. He was no longer just a buyer in a market. He was now a player in a story far larger than he planned. And whatever came next, the cost was going to be more than credits. The ship hummed softly as it drifted into slipstream, a trail of pale blue plasma disappearing behind them. Arlen sat across from Leona in the cramped passenger cabin, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the violet shard she cradled in her hands. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat trying to remember itself. He broke the silence first. You said it's called the Soul Stone. What exactly is it? Leona looked up, her voice quiet, deliberate. It's not just a gem. According to the oldest records from Valora, it's something ancient, older than the galactic Concord itself. The Soul Stone doesn't grant wishes. It makes lies become truth. If you say something false while holding it, reality changes to make it real. Arlen blinked. You mean if I say I never fought in the Malix Wars? Then you didn't, she said. Your memories, records, everything would shift. History would realign itself. No paradox, just new truth. He leaned forward slightly. That kind of power doesn't exist. Not naturally. No one knows how it works. The first known mention came from a prospector named Hessex Solari 2 centuries ago. His ship was found adrift near the Cavell corridor. His final logs contained fragments of coordinates in one line. The lie became my life. She held up the shard. This is a resonance fragment. It reacts when near the true soulstone. I found it in the ruins of a black market archive, 10 light years from Valora. It's leading us somewhere. Arlen stared at her, then asked softly, why go this far? Leona's grip on the shard tightened. My sister Lena. She died 3 years ago. Shuttle crash. But she wasn't supposed to be flying that day. She got a message. Someone invited her out. I never found who. I stayed behind, buried in my research. Her voice faltered. I want the lie to be real, that she stayed home, that she lived. Silence settled between them. Arlen could feel the weight in her words, the kind of grief that didn't just linger, but rewrote who you were. And if this changes more than just that, he asked, I've thought about it every day, and I'd still do it. He studied her a moment longer. Then he nodded once. I don't believe in magic, he said, but I've seen what grief does. He reached for the control panel. Let's see where your shard wants to take us. Zeroth did not sweat. His kind never did. The obsidian sheen of his skin glistened under the crimson lights of the Phantom Drift. His private cruiser designed for one thing. Silence. He stood at the center of the command chamber, motionless, watching a 3-dimensional projection of Arlen and Leona flicker in front of him. The image rotated slowly, pulled from dozens of micro-drones trailing the couple's ship. He didn't blink. Instead, he listened. Set trajectory to Vector 9-3 Alpha. Let the tracker drift, Zeroth ordered, his voice low and unhurried. The ship responded without a sound. Behind him, the stars shifted. Zeroth was not a typical smuggler. Born on the rogue moon Karshak VI, he had survived the collapse of his people's dominion by selling secrets to the highest bidder, secrets about energy cores, black site weapons, and most lucratively, forbidden gems. He had amassed his fortune by dealing in relics deemed too dangerous for public knowledge. He didn't collect them, he sold them. Like poisons, tailored to specific clients. But the Soul Stone? That wasn't just a relic. That was currency of control. He had first heard of it through the screams of a dying Kalari priest, whose mind he'd torn apart during an auction on Helios Prime. The priest had seen something, a truth that should not be true. That was all Zeroth needed. For 10 years, he pieced together whispers, stole fragments of data, blackmailed scholars. Then he saw the girl, Leona. She was chasing it too. And now, thanks to Arlen, she had a shard. Zeroth stepped forward, zooming in on the feed. Arlen was adjusting the ship's coordinates. Leona was still holding the gem. Her face was tight, determined, fragile. Fools, he whispered. They think it's about resurrection. He pressed a finger to the command pad, pulling up a secondary projection, one that showed star system models. A hypothetical scenario. If one could control the Soul Stone and utter the lie that Zeroth is the supreme chancellor of the galactic concord, the simulation unfolded with chilling precision. Diplomatic logs rewritten, treaties reshaped, generals kneeling in confusion. History would obey the new narrative, and that was just the start. If they even touch the soul stone, its resonance might burn through them, Zeroth murmured. But in my hands, he tapped a hidden compartment in the wall, revealing a black case. Inside were three glowing fragments from other artifacts, precursors to the soul stone, weak imitations. One had driven its last owner insane in under 6 hours. Zeroth had watched. Power, he said simply. Real power is rewriting the lies so convincingly, even the universe has no choice but to obey. Still, he wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. Not until they led him to the real stone. Let them think they were in control. Leona and Arlen were unknowingly tracing the trail for him, and when the time came, Zeroth would be there, not to bargain, but to take. The ship groaned as it lifted from the docking bay. Named the Gallows Wren, it was a relic from the Arcturus Rebellion, once a troop transport, now a patched-together freighter with peeling paint. Mismatched thrusters and reinforced hull plating scavenged from at least 3 different generations of war-era ships. She looked like she shouldn't fly, but she did, barely. "Are you sure this thing won't fall apart mid-jump?" Leona asked, gripping the console as the Wren lurched into subspace. "She's old but loyal," Arlen muttered, fingers dancing over navigation keys. "We just have to make it across 5 systems. 3 of them are unregulated. No patrols, no laws, no backup. So we're alone. We always were." The Wren's interior was cramped, smelling faintly of ozone and hydraulic oil. Supplies were limited. 2 blaster rifles, 1 med kit, 2 weeks' worth of ration cubes, a gravity lantern, and the soul stone shard. Arlen had packed pragmatically. Leona had brought data scrolls and a silver canister sealed with Valoran script. That was all they had. 4 days into the jump, somewhere between the edge of the Vesh halo and a collapsed mining zone, the ship's proximity alert began to shriek. "Something's tracking us," Arlen said, rising from the pilot's seat. A moment later, it emerged from the debris cloud, a Nethra worm, one of the void-feeding serpents native to forgotten asteroid fields. It was 30 meters long, skin like iridescent crystal, eyes glowing with feral hunger. "Why is it targeting us?" Leona gasped. Arlen grabbed his rifle. "They react to EM signatures from old warships. Probably thinks we're prey." The worm slammed into the ship's side, sending the Wren spiraling. Panels burst, sparks flew. Leona screamed, falling against the console. Arlen fired out of the emergency hatch, drawing its attention, but the creature's hide deflected every bolt. "Leona, stabilize the core!" he shouted. She crawled to the console, fingers bleeding, eyes wide but focused. "Redirecting power. Now!" The ship jerked as thrusters reignited. With a sudden burst, they shot forward, and the creature fell behind, snarling, then vanishing into the void. Panting, Leona collapsed in the chair. "I'm not a soldier," she whispered. "I thought I could handle this." Arlen knelt beside her. "You did. And next time, you'll do it faster." That night, in the quiet hum of the cabin, she retrieved a narrow scroll cylinder from her bag and unsealed it. The holographic map that unfolded above their heads wasn't just a map. It was alive, filled with shifting glyphs and pulsing coordinates. "This is from Valora's oldest temple," she said. "It reacts to the shard's frequency. It's narrowing down where the real soul stone is." Arlen frowned. "Why you? Why does it respond to you?" She hesitated. "My family was chosen. Guardians of the archive. The glyphs are bloodbound. Only I can read them." He studied the shifting map. "Could it be a trap?" "Maybe," she admitted. "But I've chased shadows for 3 years. This is the first thing that feels real." As the Wren drifted through the void, they both stared up at the map, silent. Somewhere beyond the stars, the truth, or the lie, was waiting. The Wren drifted in low orbit around a rogue moon, silent and cold. Inside its hull, the only sound was Leona's ragged breath as she twisted beneath a thermal blanket, trapped in another nightmare. The dream always began the same way. Lena laughing, brushing her silver blonde hair behind her ear, her datapad clutched tight as she read the mysterious invitation aloud. Then the shuttle launch, a comm-static spike, the sudden jolt, the crackle of alarms, and finally darkness. But this time, in the dream, Leona was there, watching, paralyzed, unable to scream as the hull ruptured and her sister vanished into fire. She woke with a violent gasp, lungs seizing like she'd drowned. Her hands trembled. Sweat soaked her suit collar. I canceled. I canceled and she went alone, she whispered into her palms. Across the cabin, Arlen sat silently by the system's console, watching the starless expanse outside. He didn't turn as she stumbled to the wash basin. Another nightmare? He asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Don't blame yourself, he added, but the words were dry, distant. Leona wiped her face. You don't know what that's like. His reply was almost too quiet to hear. I do. He rose slowly, crossing the cabin. The overhead lights cast deep shadows across his rugged face, features hardened by time and regret. I was on HFY, he began. Mercenary detail. Just another dustball war between corporations. We were hired to stabilize a village suspected of sheltering rebels. I followed orders. We leveled the place. Leona's eyes met his. He didn't flinch. There was a woman there, Sarah. She tried to warn me about the kids hiding in the lower vaults. I didn't listen. One strike drone later, and they were ash. She died pulling me from the wreckage. He sat down, staring at the floor. That was the last contract I ever took. After that, I stopped listening to orders, stopped trusting systems, just wandered. Leona sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. The silence was no longer heavy. It was shared. You never talked about her, she said. You never talked about Lena. They didn't speak for a while. Outside, a distant comet drifted past the viewport, trailing pale green fire. Later that night, as they calibrated the map again, Leona handed Arlen a set of glyph notes. You should learn to read some of this, in case something happens to me. He blinked. You think I'll outlive you? I think you're too stubborn to die, she replied with a faint smile. Arlen smirked. That's the first compliment you've given me. They exchanged a glance that lingered too long to be casual. Something between them had shifted. The next day, when they plotted a new jump toward the Kuval drift, Arlen didn't question her course, and Leona, for the first time in years, trusted someone else with her future. The station loomed ahead like a ghost from another era. It spun slowly in the dark, its outer plating pocked with micrometeorite scars, antenna arrays twisted like broken limbs. The registry tag on its rusted hull read, Yathan Relay C-12, a communications hub once operated by the Galactic Concord during the early expansion of the inner systems. It's been dead for over 40 years, Arlen muttered, studying the readouts. No power, no comms, no life signs. Leona leaned closer. But it still has a working fusion port. If we want to reach Kuval Drift, we need a recharge. And risk getting gutted by scavengers, he replied. She nodded once. We'll be quick. The gallows wren docked with a mechanical shutter. Arlen led the way, blaster drawn, eyes scanning every dark corner of the decaying interior. The corridors were narrow, lit only by the wren's emergency lights. Dust floated like ash in zero-G. Crates were overturned. Bullet holes riddled the walls. Something bad had happened here. Leona found the first clue near the central terminal, a cracked ID badge, still clipped to a torn lab coat. Dr. Valen Imri, xenocryptologist. Valorant script, she whispered, running her hand across the blood-stained wall beside the terminal. He was one of ours. They powered up the central core using a portable cell. The screen flickered to life. Logs poured across the display, fractured entries, corrupted lines. But one video log remained intact. The image showed a pale, bearded man, Dr. Valen, eyes sunken, voice frantic. To anyone who finds this, the Soul Stone is real. We found a fragment. It sang to us, showed us things, visions, memories that weren't ours. Then we started forgetting who we were. One crewman thought he was the Emperor's son. Another believed she could breathe vacuum, and tried. His hands trembled. I destroyed the fragment, but something remained. Something that watches. If you found a shard, burn it. Forget it. Leave it buried. The feed cut out. Silence followed. Even the hum of the core seemed to retreat. Arlen turned to Leona. Still think this is just a myth? She didn't answer immediately. Her face had paled, her hands clenched. Maybe it is real, she said quietly, but maybe it's not meant to be used. They explored further. In the cargo bay, Arlen stopped cold. Pinned to a wall was a small black-tinted data pad. Engraved on the back in the old trader's code was a name, Zeroth. He flipped through the files. Encrypted but familiar routing algorithms appeared. Zeroth's network signature. He'd been here, recently. He's days ahead of us, Arlen growled, and he's been pulling information from Concord Black sites. Leona frowned. If he's already mapped the Cabal drift. Then he's headed to the temple, Arlen finished grimly. They sprinted back to the Wren. As they undocked, the station began to shift, a faint pulse emanating from deep within, as if the Soulstone's echo had never truly left, or as if something else had woken. Neither of them spoke during the jump sequence. They were no longer chasing a legend. They were chasing a race against time, in a shadow that was always one step ahead. The surface of Malkuyan shimmered under a sky of shifting colors. Violet storms boiling beneath emerald clouds. The air was thin, breathable only for brief periods without filters, and carried the faint scent of oxidized metal and sulfur. The planet's crust was unstable, riddled with geothermal vents and deep fissure that hissed like living things. Arlen stepped down from the ramp of the Wren, his boots landing on obsidian rock coated in bioluminescent moss. The ground pulsed underfoot like it remembered pain. Leona followed, her silver eyes scanning the shifting terrain. Malkuyan wasn't charted for colonization, she said, adjusting her mask. Too volatile, too old. But the legends call it a place of echoing lies. The stone remembers. That's why it's tied to the Soulstone. The deeper they moved into the jungle of blackened crystal trees, the more the planet resisted. Feral shadows darted between trunks, thin, spider-limbed creatures with skin like oiled glass. At one point, a vine snapped upward like a whip, wrapping around Arlen's leg, dragging him toward a sinkhole. "Damn thing's alive," and he growled, blasting it free. The vine retracted with a hiss. "They're memory feeders," Leona murmured. "They respond to fear or guilt." They reached a hollowed-out valley surrounded by crumbling stone monoliths, etched with spiral glyphs in a forgotten tongue. The monoliths pulsed as the soulstone shard in Leona's satchel began to glow. "These were carved by the Alaran monks," she explained, kneeling to study the runes. "Long before Valora rose, they believed the soulstone wasn't an object, but a test." Arlen raised an eyebrow. "Test of what?" "Truth. The more you lie to yourself, the deeper you sink." Leona traced a glyph with her fingers, whispering ancient verses. A low rumble shook the ground. From the center of the valley, a stairway descended into the earth, revealed by shifting plates of stone. Arlen stepped closer. "That's not a vault, it's a temple." She nodded. "It only opens to those who admit why they came." Arlen stared at her. "And what did you say?" "I said, I came to undo a death, but I know it won't bring her back." For a brief second, he saw the little girl behind her pain. Inside, beneath the temple's heart, they found the coordinates, projected into the air from a prism of crystal. A star map rotated in silence, marking a system on the edge of the known galaxy. Sarath Null. "That's where the real soulstone is," Leona whispered. Arlen studied the chart. Coordinates check out. Stellar drift aligns. It's old data, but solid. Still, he hesitated. Could Zeroth have planted this? Lead us right into a trap? Leona looked at the projection, then back at the stone in her hands. He couldn't fake this resonance. Only the stone reacts. Then Sarath Null it is. They climbed back to the surface as the storm above began to crackle. The wind screamed lies into the jungle, and the path forward pulsed with terrible truth. Sarath Null was a world forgotten by every star map not written in blood. Suspended at the edge of the galaxy, it orbited a dying white dwarf star, its surface wrapped in a shroud of ash and bone-colored stone. Scans indicated almost no tectonic activity, yet somehow its crust radiated unnatural energy signatures. And beneath that, a silence, a pressure, as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Leona stood at the viewport of the gallows wren, eyes wide with awe and something like dread. "This place predates civilization," she whispered. "There are no known species that evolved here. No trade routes. It was chosen to be hidden." It had taken them 6 days in compressed subspace to reach it. The engines had overheated twice. Radiation fields forced manual steering through a dead solar reef. Arlen hadn't slept more than 4 hours since Mokuyan, but now they hovered above the coordinates. A single jagged mountain pierced the clouds like a tooth, and somewhere beneath its shadow, buried deep, was the cavern. As they descended, the air became dense, not with gas, but with memory. Every step through the canyon paths echoed with the sound of footsteps that hadn't been made yet. At the mouth of the cave, the ground shimmered faintly. "Here," Leona said, kneeling to examine a set of concentric rings carved into the stone. Trigger glyphs, motion-based, ancient Ellerin design, but layered with something else. Arlen scanned ahead with his visor. Tripwires, not physical, gravitational distortions. Step wrong, and the cave folds inward. They crept through the corridor, triggering a cascade of ancient defenses, a chamber that looped endlessly until they spoke their own names backwards, a puzzle of mirrors that reflected truths instead of light, and a field of memory leeches that whispered their darkest regrets. At one point, Leona nearly collapsed. A voice, not Arlen's, called her name from behind. She turned, trembling. There stood Lena, whole, smiling, innocent. "Leona," it said sweetly, "you found me." Arlen fired. The illusion shattered into ash. "She's gone," he said softly. "Don't let them use her face." Tears welled in Leona's eyes, but she nodded. Finally, they reached the inner chamber. The cavern opened into a vast cathedral of crystal and silence, and there, suspended above a stone altar shaped like a coiled spiral, hovered the soul stone. It was not violet, not anymore. It shifted color endlessly, red when they feared, gold when they hoped, blue when they doubted. The air warped around it like light through water. It emitted no sound, but Leona felt a vibration in her bones, like it was calling, like it knew her. "It's alive," she whispered, breath catching. Arlen didn't speak. He just stared, his hands clenched into fists. The stone pulsed once, and images flooded their minds. Lena alive and laughing, Arlen in a home he never had, universes rewritten, worlds burning, empires kneeling before imagined kings. Leona gasped. "It's offering us everything. Or showing us lies," Arlen said. "Can you feel it? It's not granting visions. It's testing belief." She looked at him. "What if I want to believe? Then it's already winning." They stood there side by side, eyes locked on the stone. And somewhere deeper in the mountain, something moved. The air fractured like glass. Without warning, a shockwave burst from the far side of the chamber, silent, invisible, but undeniable. Arlen barely had time to pull Leona behind a stone pillar before the center of the cavern erupted in a spiral of energy. When the light cleared, Zeroth stood at the altar. He was taller than Arlen remembered. His obsidian skin gleamed under the soul stone's shifting glow, and his gold-flecked eyes shimmered with triumph. His coat was gone, replaced by an exo-rig laced with neural links and pulse conductors. Behind him, a pair of servo drones hovered like metallic shadows, each armed with graviton suppressors. "How the hell did he?" Arlen started. "Shadow jump," Leona whispered. "It's illegal Concord tech. It folds space. And he must have hacked the Alaran pathways. Only a mind that's tasted the soulstone could do that." Zeroth raised his hand. The drones fired twin blasts of compressed gravity. One hit the pillar, tearing half of it into dust. Arlen rolled out, firing a counterburst that ricocheted off Zeroth's kinetic shield. "No more games," Zeroth said, voice calm. "No more riddles. You led me here. And for that, I'll let you live long enough to watch the universe reshape." "Over my dead body," Arlen snarled. That was the idea. But Leona wasn't listening. Her eyes were locked on something else. Something Zeroth held loosely in his left hand. A pendant. "No, Lena's pendant." Leona's voice cracked. "Where did you get that?" Zeroth turned slowly, his smirk subtle. "She was curious, naive, too trusting. I sent the message, Offered her a contract, just a meeting. I never expected she'd come alone. Leona staggered. You were the one who... I didn't kill her, he said. I just didn't stop it. She crashed. I had other deals to close. She was just a minor inconvenience. Silence fell. Then something in Leona broke. She screamed, not in fear, but in rage, and lunged forward with a flash pulse blade drawn from her thigh holster. Arlen moved in tandem, flanking left. Zeroth twisted, activating his shoulder-mounted arc cannon. The room lit up in blue fire. The fight was chaos. Zeroth's drones formed a defensive perimeter, projecting magnetic fields that bent laser trajectories. Arlen tossed an EMP charge. One drone blinked out, spiraling into the cavern floor. Zeroth retaliated with a shockwave, sending Arlen crashing into a crystal wall, blood trickling from his temple. Leona danced like lightning, small, quick, impossible to hit directly. She darted under Zeroth's blade, carving a line across his armor. Sparks flew, but the exosuit adapted instantly. You're nothing, Zeroth growled. You're just pain dressed in skin. I am pain, she spat, plunging the blade deeper. Zeroth roared, swinging wildly. Arlen rejoined the fight, slamming a reinforced gauntlet into Zeroth's spine. For a moment, they had him off balance. But the Soul Stone began to react. The cavern's walls rippled. Gravity inverted briefly. A void pocket formed overhead, distorting sound and time. Arlen fired, but his bullet bent midair. Reality's unraveling, Leona gasped. The Soul Stone's feeding on us. Zeroth reached for it, just inches away now. Arlen lunged, tackling him, sending both men crashing to the floor. Leona grabbed the Soul Stone. Everything stopped. The cave froze. Time crystallized. The drones hung motionless. Even thought felt suspended. And then, slowly, reality resumed, but bent at the seams. The altar cracked. A deep rumble echoed. Walls trembled. They had crossed a line. The moment hung in tension. Zeroth reaching, Leona clutching the Soul Stone, Arlen bleeding beside the fractured altar, when the cavern's ceiling suddenly exploded with precision. Light poured in. With a deafening crack, 6 Vanguard drop units descended through the breach. Clad in matte black exo armor with glowing blue insignias, each figure moved in perfect synchronicity. Their helmets bore the emblem of the IGPF, Intergalactic Peace Federation, the most powerful cross-sector enforcement agency in known space. A voice barked through an amplified translator. Subject Zeroth Vaal, by Protocol 91C of the Anti-Artifact Trade Treaty, you are under arrest. Surrender immediately. Arlen blinked in disbelief. How the hell? I called them, Leona said breathlessly. Back at the Yathan station. I triggered a silent Concord distress code. Deep channel. I didn't know if they'd come. One of the units broke rank, scanning the scene with a shoulder-mounted drone. Tachyon distortions consistent with Soulstone activation. Level 3 instability. Containment priority. Zeroth snarled, clutching his side. You bureaucratic insects don't know what you're touching. You're not authorized to speak, came the cold reply. He moved to raise his weapon, but the Vanguard was faster. A kinetic net launched from the lead unit, wrapping around Zeroth's limbs and armor. Electricity surged, dropping him to the ground. He convulsed violently before falling still. The commanding officer, identified only by the serial G17, approached slowly. We've been tracking Zeroth's movement through 4 systems. The datapad recovered from the Yathan station linked him to over a dozen illegal gem trades, 3 of which resulted in mass psychosis events. You, the officer turned to Leona, led us to the final piece. Zeroth coughed, spitting blood. You're all fools. You think putting me in chains ends this? The truth is already cracking. Leona stepped forward, fury simmering just beneath her skin. You let my sister die to make a deal. Zeroth only laughed. A stun baton silenced him. Meanwhile, Arlen, still limping, turned to Leona. The Soul Stone, you still have it? She nodded. But as she opened her hand, they both saw it. A faint crack had appeared along the side of the gem. It pulsed more erratically now, the shifting colors darker, more chaotic. The fight, it destabilized it, she whispered. It's reacting to conflict. One of the Vanguard units stepped forward, raising a containment capsule. Per Concord protocol, the object must be seized for universal security. Its existence is now classified. No, Leona said, stepping back. You don't understand what it does. We do, the officer replied. Which is why we can't let you keep it, Arlen interjected. If you seal it in a vault, it'll draw more like Zeroth. They'll come. They always come. The officer paused. Then what do you suggest? Leona looked down at the stone. It can't be hidden. It can't be kept. And it can't fall into hands like his again. She glanced at Arlen. We destroy it. The cavern rumbled again, as if the Soul Stone had heard and disagreed. But for the first time since this began, Arlen and Leona were no longer alone. And now the fate of the Soul Stone would be decided by more than just grief and ambition. The cavern had quieted. Zeroth was gone, dragged away in reinforced stasis cuffs by the Vanguard. The dust settled, the drones deactivated, the last shockwaves of the fight still humming faintly in the air. But the Soul Stone remained. Leona stood before it, her breathing shallow, hand hovering just inches from its fractured surface. The crack in its shell pulsed like an open wound, alive, raw. Inside, colors swirled like galaxies, collapsing into themselves. She could hear it again, whispering. Lena's voice. Leona, I'm not gone. You found the way. You, just touch it. Behind her, Arlen paced restlessly, wiping dried blood from his brow. You're still thinking about using it. She didn't turn. If there's even a chance to what? He snapped. Rewrite time? Create a new version of your sister? One who never lived the same life? It's not resurrection, Leona. It's replacement. Her voice was thin. You don't understand what it's like to live with that kind of emptiness. I do, he said coldly, and that's why I know what it'll cost you. She finally turned, eyes flashing. Then why not destroy it yourself? He stopped walking, looked her dead in the eye. Because you need to be the one who chooses. Silence stretched between them like a blade. The Soul Stone pulsed again, and the cavern shifted. Stones on the far wall warped. Shadows bled upward. A ring of gravitational distortion rippled out from the stone, distorting light and bending their perceptions. For a moment, Arlen saw himself on a throne of bone. Leona saw Lena, grown and laughing, a life never lived, but completely real. Leona clutched her head. It's showing us what we want. Arlen grimaced. No, it's weaponizing it. You see it? The pull, the warmth, the illusion of comfort? It's not helping. It's manipulating. The air turned electric. Pebbles lifted from the floor. The Soul Stone's hum deepened into a low, resonant chord, one that vibrated inside their bones. Leona backed away, heart hammering. It's defending itself. The realization hit her hard. It's not just a conduit, it's aware. For a heartbeat, she hesitated. Then slowly, she stepped forward again. My sister is dead, she whispered, and I've been lying to myself for years. I thought I could bring her back, but what I really wanted was to avoid the pain of remembering. Tears streaked down her face as she turned to Arlen. I can't build a life on that. He walked toward her, resting a hand on her shoulder. You sure? She nodded once, firmly. Then let's end this. Together, they activated the Alaran failsafe, a mechanism hidden beneath the altar, a fusion of memory tech and void compression. As Leona placed the Soul Stone into the cradle, the device came alive. Symbols flared across the cavern walls. The stone resisted, howling, vibrating, screaming in colors and sound that didn't exist. The ground shook, light bent, reality groaned. And then, silence. A blinding white pulse burst outward, then faded. Where the Soul Stone had hovered, there was nothing. Not even heat, just a void. A silence deeper than space. Leona exhaled. Her knees gave out. Arlen caught her. It's over, she said. Maybe, he replied, but something tells me it left a scar. And indeed, deep in the fabric of space-time, something had shifted. Universes nearby paused. Fractures formed along ancient truths. Not enough to break reality, but enough to remind it that a lie, once believed deeply enough, can still echo. The fail-safe chamber was ancient, buried deep beneath the cavern's altar. Carved into concentric circles of obsidian and quartz, it radiated no energy until the soul stone was placed inside. Then the runes flared to life in patterns neither Leona nor Arlen had ever seen, spinning around them like a galaxy folding in on itself. "It's a compression crucible," Leona breathed. "Ellerin design, but older than their oldest archives. This wasn't built to protect the soul stone. It was built to contain it, then end it." Arlen knelt beside the mechanism. "It's keyed to thought, intention. That's why only you could activate it." Leona placed her hand against the central control glyph. "Once I confirm my choice, the reaction is irreversible." "And dangerous," Arlen added. "We're standing in a chamber designed to erase something that alters reality. That energy's got to go somewhere." She looked at him. "Then don't stand too close." The machine began to spin, slowly at first, then faster, humming with a deep harmonic resonance. The soul stone, still cracked, floated into the air. It resisted, twisting against the pull. The light around it shifted to crimson. "We need to stabilize the core," Leona said, "or the backlash could take out more than just the cave." Together they realigned the spiral rings. The room vibrated like the heart of a dying star. And then it happened. The soul stone imploded, collapsed inward with a silent scream. Not with fire or sound, but with the sudden absence of everything. Light, color, sound, gravity, all were momentarily devoured. In its place, a void tear hung in the air. An irregular ellipse, blacker than black, rippling faintly at the edges like oil and water. Space around it twisted. Time stuttered. "That's a dimensional fracture," Arlen said, stunned. "A true one." Leona staggered back. "It wasn't just an artifact. It was a keystone in the structure of reality." The cavern groaned. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. The void pulsed once, then twice, sending out waves that pushed against their suits and crushed air from their lungs. Then, as if deciding they weren't prey, it went still. "We have to go," Arlen said. "Can we?" Leona whispered. They barely made it to the surface. The Gallows Wren's onboard AI registered a gravitational fluctuation increase of 5,000% in a radius of 2 kilometers. The cavern collapsed behind them, bearing the void tear, but not erasing it. In orbit, the stars flickered strangely. Long-range sensors picked up subspace echoing, ripples through jump lanes, navigation grids faltering. Not catastrophic, but wrong. Fundamental constants had shifted by decimal points. Arlen sat in the cockpit, breathing heavily. If that spread had reached inhabited systems... Leona stared silently out the viewport, fingers clenched. "Lena's gone. Not just dead. Gone. Even the lies are gone now." "Do you regret it?" he asked gently. She turned. Her face was pale but resolute. "No. If something that dangerous had remained, someone worse than Zeroth would have found it." Arlen nodded. "Then we did the right thing." They sat in silence for a long time. "So what now?" she asked. He offered a tired grin. "We fly until the stars don't look like ghosts anymore." She smiled faintly. "Then let's choose new ones." The Wren powered up, engines humming low, and behind them the void shimmered, like a secret not yet finished whispering. 3 weeks had passed since the Soul Stone was destroyed, but the universe did not return to normal. It couldn't. Some fractures never sealed. On Valora, a world still mourning its losses from the collapse cycles ago, the revelation about Lena's death and the role of an off-world trafficker sparked something rarely seen across star systems. Collective grief turned to unified outrage. News feeds were flooded with archived messages, recovered logs, and fragments of Leona's recorded testimony, released deliberately by conquered officials after her return. The message was simple: a life stolen not by fate, but by choice. Valoran leaders issued a planetary decree in Lena's name, banning all interstellar artifact trade and formally initiating the Lena Accords, demanding new oversight regulations across conquered space. Even hostile alien powers previously uninterested in such human matters took note. If a single illegal gem trade could nearly rip reality apart, no government could afford to ignore it. Meanwhile, at the outer edges of the Seraph Null Breach, scientific vessels reported strange anomalies. Navigation beacons that looped endlessly, memory echoes of conversations that hadn't yet occurred, and in one isolated case, a survey team of 3 vanishing mid-transmission, only to reappear hours later, 2 days younger. No survivors reported physical harm, the report noted, but their internal chronometers show asynchronous decay. They experienced time differently. The void tear had been buried, but not neutralized. On Concord's deepest threat tier, it was reclassified as a Class Red anomaly, a status reserved only for threats capable of cross-dimensional destabilization. Patrols were increased, proximity jumps forbidden, and drone monitors installed in orbit. Still, nothing could be guaranteed. The Soulstone was gone, but the scar it left behind was permanent. In the aftermath, Arlen and Leona became household names across half the galaxy. The ones who refused the lie, they were called on Valora. The Breakers of the Stone, on Terra 3. The Concord awarded them with the Order of Temporal Integrity, a medal so rarely given that its last recipient had stopped a black hole weapon from erasing a dwarf galaxy. But neither of them attended the ceremony. In truth, they had quietly disappeared. Back on the Gallows Wren, anchored far beyond the trade lanes of the Central Systems, Arlen sat in the co-pilot seat with his boots on the console, watching a slow star rise over the horizon of a quiet moon. Leona entered, hair tied back, a steaming mug in hand. "They're still trying to give us planets. Tell them I'm allergic to planets." She smiled. "You sure you don't want to be a legend?" "I already am," he said with mock arrogance. "In 24 wanted posters and 3 pirate radio songs." Her laughter was soft, genuine. They said nothing for a while. Then she asked the question neither had dared yet speak aloud. "What do we do now?" Arlen looked at her, the woman who had once chased a lie so deep it nearly swallowed the stars. The woman who chose truth instead. "We find a story that doesn't try to rewrite itself." And with that, the wren lifted into the dark once more. Not to chase power or regret, but something far rarer in the galaxy. Peace. The docking platform at the Valora border station was quiet in the early light. Far below, the twin moons drifted across a pale blue sky, casting their long shadows over the forest Leona had once memorized from orbit. The Gallows Wren sat humming beside her, its engines idle for the first time in days. Arlen stood at the edge of the landing bay, arms crossed, watching the silent hills beyond. Leona approached with her satchel slung over one shoulder, no longer burdened by grief, but not yet free from it either. "You're not coming?" she asked. He shook his head. "I've never been good with homecomings. Besides, I'm not the ceremonial type." She nodded slowly. "I'm staying. For now. The Valoran Memory Council asked me to help document what happened. They're rebuilding the archives, and I need to make sure the truth survives." "Ha ha, you're rewriting history," he said with a dry smirk. "Just recording it right this time." They stood in silence, the weight of parting heavier than the words they could share. "You going back to Earth?" she finally asked. He hesitated. "Maybe, or maybe somewhere nobody's heard of me. I've got a list of places that only exist on rumor. I figure I'll try living in one." She offered her hand. He took it, firm but warm. "I wouldn't have made it without you, Arlen." He gave a rare, real smile. "I wouldn't have wanted to." Then with a nod, he boarded the Wren. The ramp hissed closed, and moments later the ship lifted into the sky, vanishing into the horizon, leaving behind only contrails and memory. Leona turned back to the station, where reporters, scholars, and officials awaited her testimony. But already the legend had begun to grow. They said the Soulstone was destroyed, yet across the galaxy, stories emerged, each more fantastical than the last. Some claimed the stone had merely shifted dimensions, waiting for another bearer. Others believed it had split, with pieces now hidden in the memories of those who had touched it. Smugglers whispered of a dream stone auctioned on deep void markets. Cultists formed shrines praying for a second coming of the lie that became truth. Even Concord officials admitted, off-record, that reality's constants were still not entirely consistent. Why? because belief was harder to kill than fact. And in dark corners of space, people still searched. But the truth, the real truth, had been recorded. Two names etched into the quiet beneath the stars. Two people who had a choice: to shape the galaxy to their will or protect it from becoming a lie. In time, the legend of Arlen and Leona became required reading in academies and command schools alike, not just as history, but as warning. That true power was not in shaping reality, but in having the strength not to. They taught that strength was sacrifice and that some truths, no matter how painful, must remain untouched. And so the stone was gone, but the story remained, and perhaps that was enough. In the vast silence between stars, their names faded from headlines but remained etched in memory. Arlen vanished into uncharted systems, chasing quiet skies. Leona rebuilt among her people, her truth stronger than any myth. The soul stone was gone, but its echo lingered in tales, in questions, in caution. And somewhere in the galaxy's hush, a whisper endured. Power is not in changing reality, but in choosing not to. That choice, made once in the heart of darkness, became a light, guiding those who came after, long after the legend ended and the stars kept turning.